Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, in addition, any babies in the immediate vicinity, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I'm your host, Deven Morgan. We back. In the words of Beanie Siegel, guess who's Bizak? Yes, as a 48-year-old man, I'm still going to use the phrase Bizak eventually. Hey, we're back. It's been a while. Shouldn't have left you, as per usual. Had a lot going on, of which we're going to talk a little bit about today, just to kind of keep you guys in the loop. And I don't know, man, like I had a fair amount of people are like, hey, what's up with the pod? So thank you. I know I say this stuff all the time. It is not lost on me, the privilege that I have to be able to like come in here and talk about baseball and have some of you guys want to listen. So thank you. For new listeners, first-time listeners, last-time listeners, a quick bit of housekeeping, axbat.com, code DL20, as in, I don't know, Dynamite Leotard 20 will get you 20% off with our friends at axbat.com, so go holler at them. Youth assessments at Driveline, it's a thing now, drivelinebaseball.com/training/youth. It's a thing. You can come in and figure out where you are in the spring, figure out what you need to work on over the course of this competitive season moving into the summer, give you a path for like how to stay competitive and grow and get better in the game with a level of insight that you just can't get at your local DBAT. And I'm not saying that as a way to disparage anybody that goes to DBAT. Been there, done that. I'm just saying that our thing is different. You get a chance to work with one of our trainers, talk about a training plan, what you need to do to get better, and a tremendous amount of insight in order to figure out what that plan is. And that's what we do with the youth assessment product. So drivelinebaseball.com/training/youth or 425-523-4030, support at drivelinebaseball.com. It's almost like I was the manager of our CR department at some point in the long distant past. Anyways, preamble done. Hi, how are you? My name is Deven. It's nice to see you guys again. One of the things that occupied a significant amount of my last life or so since we've recorded one of these is everything we got going with the MLB Pitch Smart 2.0 initiative, which I have referred to around these parts previously as the standard for universal pitch counts and universal reporting. I got a lot to bring you guys up to speed about. I think the first thing that I will note is to everyone who ever told me that this is a thing that couldn't get done, I hope you enjoy your life riddled with pessimism. Because what I will tell you is that when you get enough people in the room who have the opportunity to make decisions and care about a thing, it's not that hard to like get everybody on the same page about how does the thing we care about get better. And with that as a stage setting, let's talk about where we are with universal pitch counts, universal reporting. So to bring, again, first-time listeners, welcome. Hi, how are you? Into the conversation, I've been a part of the ABCA Youth and Travel Baseball committees for the last 6-ish some odd years. And for the last 4 of those years, I've had the opportunity to participate in the annual Youth Summit. The Youth Summit is something that has been driven by the work of Rob Hahne from Northern Virginia Travel Baseball, also ABCA board member, and now 4th ABCA vice president. And Rob's the man. So Rob Hahne, Ryan Brownlee, John Litchfield, that crew over at ABCA in one way or another have been instrumental in kind of putting this group together that we affectionately call a coalition. And we've tried to be really upfront and engaging about building this coalition and getting people involved in this conversation who have the opportunity to both contribute to the discussion and then make decisions. So we've had 4 annual youth baseball summits that typically precede the ABCA National Committee meeting. And 2 years ago, when we were in beautiful Augusta, Georgia, where your boy did not dare besmirch the course with one of just my like absolute snap hook power drives. The idea that I rolled out was like, hey, we just need to start taking some action here. And I think that can center itself around eliminating what we know to be true, which is that in certain youth baseball leagues or tournament providers, there are either no standard for pitch count and workload regulation, or different standards for pitch count and workload regulation of any number of different forms. MLB Pitch Smart, which is an initiative that came out, circa a decade ago, kind of set the first stage for how to correlate throwing volume with rest. But the standard hasn't been updated in more than a decade. And part of the issue with Pitch Smart in general is that like the implementation wasn't equal, meaning that like different people could kind of choose different levels of compliance. You had organizations like Little League who, hey, like we're just going to make this a mandatory thing, and boom, it's a mandatory thing. And then not all the providers or leagues kind of followed that way. So as such, you have some air gaps in this system. Wherein number one, not everybody's kind of playing by the same rules when it comes to workload. Another way to state that is that not everybody has the same level of system and structure to keep kids healthy and safe while playing our game. It's perhaps the more pertinent way to frame it. And then beyond that, you have kind of the base issues with a non-technologically connected system, which is left hand, right hand. Kid pitches in a rec baseball game on a Thursday. That environment is governed by PitchSmart, but then if they go throw in a PG, PBR, 5-star, whatever event on the weekend, right hand, left hand don't talk to each other. There's no system to kind of equalize that stuff. So what we proposed is basically a twofold thing. And we were able to present this to Major League Baseball, myself, Rob Hahne, Taylor McCullough from Perfect Game, again, Jordan Baltimore, Ryan Brownlee, all intimately involved in this discussion. And we presented to Major League Baseball and just said like, hey, this is what I think, you guys should do. And we're building the coalition that is actually going to allow this thing to potentially be implemented in a way that's significantly different and more even in implementation than the original PitchSmart. That was received very well, had some very productive conversations with the folks from Major League Baseball and USA Baseball that were in attendance. And it was like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And that was the March before this March, so March of 2025. And in the time period since then, again, we've continued to build out the coalition, continue to bring in more high leverage partners that are people who, again, are just overseeing like tremendous numbers of kids, and start to have conversations with these leagues and tournament providers about like, hey, this is where we're going. Well, what do you think? How are you with this stuff? What do you want to do? So then this March, we had another kind of call to meeting at Major League Baseball, but it was a little bit of a different audience. When we were at the ABCA committee, the ABCA convention in beautiful Columbus, one of the things that we did was have some private conversations, again, leagues, large orgs, large providers, etc., putting us in a position to have those specific folks come to New York this March of 2026, and like, let's get together in the room and try to figure out what type of signal we can send. And I don't want to be telling tales out of school. I need to keep some amount of this, I think, hidden behind a little bit of a curtain. But I think a lot of it, I don't think it's going to hurt to let you guys know what's going on. So this March, a different meeting in Major League Baseball, because the people that were in that room, I don't know, does it hurt anything to name them? I don't know. Maybe not. So here's how I will frame this. The people who are in the room this time are all the people who kind of run at a scale where they don't necessarily need to be beholden to anything other than what works best for their organization. I think if you read between the lines, you probably can pick up what I'm putting down here about the scale and scope of these organizations that we're bringing in that are large players in either the league or the tournament side. Well, largely on the tournament, maybe showcase side, wherein they are not currently running a version of the PitchSmart standard. And they're just, when that rolled out, they elected to do something different, or maybe, not something at all. And that was the people in the room. So it's those folks. It's, again, the core of our committee, Brian Brownlee, Jordan Baltimore, Rob Hahne, myself and a bunch of others, Taylor McCullough. Again, I don't want I don't want to be that guy that's like standing on the stage and forgetting names, but like if you've heard me talk about this on episodes past, again, no, this is not just like a singular thing that I'm solely responsible for. I have the luxury of being to work with and underneath, people in these groups that I just have a tremendous amount of esteem for, both at a professional and personal level. So this is not, it's not just me. Might be my idea in so much as that matters and who cares. It's a lot of the stuff that's like, hey, what are we trying to do? Kind of came from, my initial thing back in Augusta, but it's not, man, this is not like one guy paddling a boat with 2 oars, right? It's a ship. Trying to think if my grandpa is going to yell at me about that analogy. Were he still with us? No, I think he would get it. So anyways, so we're in the room, and let me back up. So flat out on Monday, meet specifically with kind of our coalition team. So myself, Rob, Ryan, Jordan is really kind of, the meat of that crew for this particular one. Taylor McCullough came in a little bit later the next day, and started to kind of talk about some of the strategy stuff that we have to try to, push this thing forward, and ideally try to figure out like, all right, well, what are the questions and concerns that might come up in the room? How do we identify and resolve those things early? And then once we get to the room, have a fairly firm idea or a thought about how the thing is going to go. So that was Monday. Had a great little dinner at a little shop called Peter Luger's that you may or may not have heard of. How do you dislike a steak that good? I don't know. I'm sure that we have some people that listen to this show that are vegans or vegetarians, and if you are, my apologies. Man, Peter Luger's was good. Anyways, Tuesday had a little bit of a pre-meeting to kind of just set the stage with John D'Angelo and the folks, Kevin and Bill with the MLB office, and then had a little bit of like a social and then a dinner with all the folks that we invited in. And had some opportunities to talk to some of those providers again, like early, to try to figure out like, what are the concerns? Do we have, is there logistical issues? Is there operational issues? Is there just kind of like, I think it should be this way type of issues? And there's all this type of stuff you kind of got to get out. You got to get out in front of if you want to try to push this thing forward. And I'm trying to think of how to frame this. One of the more interesting little tidbits that came out was a provider who executes at a very large scale, and just kind of like, hey, we're going to move towards like we're building like a tracking thing, like we're already kind of going to build the infrastructure. And it was like, oh, well, this is. And it was one of them where, the biggest concern previously had been like logistically, is this large organization that doesn't run the standard currently, is it just going to be such like an operational blocker for them that they would be reluctant to accept one of these type of like, this universal pitch count, universal reporting thing, because they just don't have the structure for it. So finding out at the dinner the night before the meeting that like they were actually kind of moving in this direction, in a somewhat parallel direction already, was just like tremendously invigorating, and made me feel, bizarrely confident going into the meeting at MLB. And I will say that just like it is like a bizarre amount of confidence, because this is something that in one way, shape, or form I have been screaming about online for probably a decade, if not perhaps a little bit more. And it just made me feel really good that people care. People want to make the game better. People are trying to leave it better than they found it. People are willing to not necessarily put their business interests first, but like consider the other implementation potential of like, hey, maybe if we just build a better mousetrap, more people want to play our game. It was just very bizarre. So really positive, dinner and social the night before, and then we get into the room, and so this conversation starts to crystallize about like, all right, well, like, what are we actually proposing? And, again, what we're proposing is a system that looks like kind of like two layers to it. One is using biomechanic data to create a pitch count standard, rather than kind of just like living and dying off of an anecdote and just kind of throwing a dart at the wall and going like, well, I think if a kid throws 30 pitches, they should rest for a day. But if it's less than 30, then they shouldn't rest. And right now, I'm not saying in either side of that, like what I think is right. What I am saying, and again, this is the intention behind our initiative, is if we want answers to these type of questions, there's a path to understand them quantifiably. And that path weaponizes Driveline Pulse, which, I mean, I could go get it and show it to you. I don't know that we have like a ton of people that watch this show, but just somewhere on that shelf back there, there's a pulse sensor, right? Like there and up. It's actually off frame. Anyways, horrendous visual reveal. My bad. So the thought is that with the pulse sensor, because you are capturing per throw workload cost, meaning it's a combination of height, weight, arm speed, arm angle, and from that you can extrapolate like the torque value on the body on a per throw basis. And if you have that, then you can go, all right, well, if we have like 50 throws that are roughly around the same output, then that creates a total workload value of Y, right? It's X per throw times Y number of throws equals Z total workload. Well, if you understand that, if you understand what that total session workload is and what that workload creates, you can also understand the amount of rest that it takes for that line to kind of get smoothed back out and be somewhere around like the acute to chronic workload ratio of around a 1.3, which from all the previous research that we have, good peer-reviewed research, suggests that ACR ratio, acute to chronic workload ratio of around 1.3 is if we stay in and around that number, players are more likely to be injured. Players are less likely to be injured and more likely to be safe because you're avoiding the thing that we worry about the most, which is a spike in workload. And there's two ways that spike can take place. One is like the acute on a single day. So what does that look like in practice? Kid throws a series of like 3 20 to 25 pitch pens leading up to the season. And then you run him out there for like 80 pitches in the first start. That ain't it, my guy. To understand the reason is like, if you think about that workload, it's like the workload gets in and we have some rest, another bullpen, and then rest, another bullpen, and rest, a little bit of rest, 80 pitches. The human body is like super good at adaptation and progressive adaptation, progressive overload. These are all like well-studied and understood principles in human performance broadly. So if you take that idea and you apply it to throwing, it makes sense why a kid who had a series of like 20 pitch pens and then goes in and throw 80s in a game is more likely to be hurt because their body wasn't given enough time to accumulate exposure to that type of level of stimulus. They weren't ready for it. 3 20 pitch pens over the course of 3 weeks with 6 days in between them does not adequately prepare you for that volume of throwing. So that's like the primary concept. The more broad term concept is like if you run that playbook over and over and over, where in some way, shape, or form you are accumulating more workload than you have time and rest to let that workload number subside, the chronic workload number starts to go up and up and up and up and up and up, and it starts to get outside of the boundaries of that 1.3 acute to chronic workload ratio that's more likely to keep a kid safe. And you get the inverse of that, which is you're more likely to be injured. And the reason is because of fatigue. Again, longtime listeners have heard this rant before, but because there's a possibility that maybe new listeners are going to pick up on this thing that like we're actually figuring some stuff out. Hi, my name is Deven. Again, it's nice to meet you. The thing that we understand scientifically is as kids continue to throw, that continual activity creates fatigue in the same way that it would is if you were just like doing, infinite amounts of push-ups or air squats or running, right? You're working yourself into fatigue. And what we understand that happens with throwing when you start to accumulate more and more fatigue is two things happen. you start to see kinetic and kinematic changes, meaning that your body moves differently and oftentimes worse, and your performance starts to go down. Okay, those are the big warning signs. And the reason why coaches for years have said that, like, hey, one of the ways that you can just simply, monitor for fatigue is just watch a kid's mechanics, is because those coaches are good enough to kind of have a fair understanding of how a kid generally moves, and then they start to see deviations from that pattern that are fueled by fatigue. Now, I'm certainly not saying that like everybody should just trust their local coaches. That's a Rap Soto joke. Trust their visual assessment of a guy and determine when and where they should be pulling them out or when they get fatigued. Like that's a bad system. Like that's like it's like a highway patrol sitting on the side of the freeway with no speed limit and watching different people drive by at differing level of speeds and trying to go like, well, that guy's doing a $105, but like he seems to have a good idea, but like that 105 in like the in a Nissan Altima. Shout out to crazy Nissan Altima drivers. That one is concerning to me, so I'm going to go pull that guy over, right? I'm not saying that that's the system we should have. I'm just saying that there are coaches who are good enough that way that they can kind of eyeball it and see when a kid starts to get fatigued because of the way their mechanics change, and then ideally make a good decision to pull that kid off the field. But again, that's not a system, right? That's not a system. So what we understand, again, is fatigue continues to accumulate, kinetic and kinematic changes that are not, you're not getting better. And then if you continue to throw through that, you start to see an increased risk drastically of injury. I believe on the PitchSmart site, they say that continuing to throw with fatigue is like a 37x multiplier on your injury risk. So again, if I could just like mind control everyone in the country and be like, don't allow your kids to continue to throw when they're fatigued, and have a system to monitor for fatigue, then we wouldn't need all this political action. But I can't, so we got to do the other thing. So we're trying to do the other thing. So we get in the room, and some light conversation started. It was kind of started a little bit slow, and then pretty quickly it just kind of seemed to be a thing where like we're getting contribution and conversation from leagues and tournament providers, myself, John D'Angelo, folks on the MLB team. And it starts to feel like it's like this foregone conclusion that everybody just kind of agrees that like this is a thing that we should do and it's a thing that we should pursue. And it all felt very surreal to me. And then we go around the room and just like literally for all the big providers, just gave an opportunity to say like publicly, hey, is this a thing, participating in this coalition, this voluntary coalition? And I can't undersell that part of it. It's voluntary. These people don't have to be there. They don't have to show up. They're free to run their businesses kind of however they want. But we're trying to appeal to their sense of let's do the right thing. Let's choose to do the thing that is going to be more protective of kids, because if we keep these kids healthy, they're more likely to continue to play. I mean, there's, and I'm sure that there's some amount of altruism there as well, right? Like if I'm a mid to a large tier tournament provider and I get the sense that Major League Baseball or some version of Major League Baseball, whether that's MLB, USA Baseball, some other third entity that could be created, I don't know. But if there's some amount of that type of leverage that's coming, then yeah, I want to participate in it because I don't want the red letter. I don't want the other thing. But I want to emphasize one thing in particular, which is the profound amount of appreciation that I have for all these folks to not only get in the room, but be open to the conversation and then see, again, whether this is altruistic or whether that's just because they believe it's for the betterment of the game or some combination of all two or both of those things, that we're going around the room and we're like, yeah, I'm down. Yep, we'll try it out. Yep, let's continue to move forward. Yep. So, we have that kind of like, you know, all in favor say aye kind of moment. I get a little bit of a tour of the MLB offices, which is really, really cool. Um, Go downstairs, have like a little wrap up lunch with my guys on the team, and then I hop in a lift to go get to the airport so I can get through that and get home. And I'm, again, I got a lot of time to sit there and think because the ride from the lift from like downtown Manhattan to JFK was a little like an hour 20 or something. So good luck with that, New Yorkers. If I ever say anything about traffic in Seattle, I now have a new frame of reference, being that I've been at New York a couple times. It felt very surreal, like very, very, very surreal to go from, being told that this is not a thing that will ever get off the ground to going around the room and having people, you know, put their support behind this thing that started as just me being pissed off about what I saw in youth baseball and overuse and thinking about a different systems-led approach to solve for it. I, I'm just a youth baseball coach, man. I coach youth baseball because my kids wanted to play. Not that great of a baseball player when I played. I had a little moment. Wasn't good enough when it mattered. Wasn't tough enough to stick in the game. However you want to slice it. I've talked about it in the book. You want to get the full story. I don't want to be that guy, but like it's in the book. But I will say that it was just it's just incredibly surreal. Sitting in the cab, texting with my wife, and I'm just like, yeah, I think everybody in the room basically said that they're down to do this thing. And I want to paint a clear picture of like how far we've come. In 2014, there was one state in the country that had pitch count limits. In 2017, there were 44 states. Now, because we've gone through this process of PitchSmart and kind of, broader implementation, I think that's now a 50 state thing, but trying to steer a ship this size is a monumental task. And I'm not going to talk about this thing like it's done, because it's not, and there's so much work that needs to take place. So much work that needs to take place coming out of this. But still very surreal to be in that room and have it just be like very much like a foregone conclusion. Like, yeah, like, we want to support this thing. We want to be down. It still doesn't seem real. And since that time, we've got some other positive signals that MLB is supporting some of the other research initiatives that it's going to take to get this thing done. I've been working on a couple things, revision to the Pulse UI, the user interface for the Pulse sensor. What we're going to do is we're going to make like a drastically simplified version of that for the youth market that kind of communicates very much in a basic like red light, green light sense. I've built kind of like a prototype version of the app or what that app could look like. And I need to, kind of include all of my partners in the coalition and some other folks and kind of how that's going to work. But it's moving forward. And, again, if you told me that this was the thing 2 years ago, that we can make this amount of progress in this short a time, I probably wouldn't believe you. So again, I just have to give all the credit in the world to the folks that are in the room, people on the coalition, and certainly that circle, man, of the folks that are on these ABCA Youth and Travel Baseball committees who participate in these youth summits over the course of these last 4 years, that were really like the gestation of this idea to begin with. I feel myself very lucky and very privileged to be able to participate in these rooms, and I think PitchMart 2.0 is a thing. It's not done. I don't know when it's going to be done. There is a ton of work in front of us, but I have never been more bullish about this being a thing that we could like a change that we could actually affect for the good of millions of kids in this game. Literal millions of kids in this game can be positively affected by a better and a more evenly implemented standard. And it's getting there. We're working. Now, with that said, probably a good idea to talk about some of the other stuff that has occupied some amount of my time. Most recently is completed a little bit of a study here at Old Driveline Baseball about weighted balls and kids. Previously, all of the existing weighted ball research, as far as I'm aware, largely revolves around participants who are high school and up players. And that's everything from the initial American Sports Medicine Institute study on weighted balls that came to the groundbreaking conclusion that as ball weight went up, stress on the joint went down. Driveline Baseball replicated that research, came to the exact same conclusion, and some other studies as well. But those studies haven't included a significant portion or a sum total of all youth athletes. And thanks to the work of El Jefe, Kyle Bodie, founder of Driveline Baseball, we got a little bit of a research project going. So we brought in around 30 kids, had them do a little under 500 throws in the lab with 3 different ball weights, 4 ounce, 5 ounce, and a 6 ounce. And turned the biomech on and measured, how that stuff worked. And basically what we came down to is replicating the exact same fundamental concept is what was already established by the ASMI and the Driveline research, which is ball weight went up, stress on the joint went down. Now, there are some very interesting layers to how this works that I need to make sure that I try to communicate as effectively as possible. And warning that, this is a little bit of... There's some science here, so this is my science warning, right? So I posted this thing on socials, and I said, this is from the implications that are currently written, basically the output of this little study, which are: heavier balls are genuinely protective. Kids throw them slower, and slower means less joint stress. That protection is real, but at the same pitch speed, ball weight barely changes the load on the elbow or the shoulder. Velocity is what drives joint stress, not ball weight. Now, I will offer that last statement, right? Velocity, what drives joint stress, not what the ball weighs, is a little bit. It's painting with a very, very broad brush. So I posted about it, and again, I know what I'm doing. Sometimes I have to get a little bit. I don't want to say aggro, but declaratory. I don't know how you would say it. Sometimes I got to be a little bit out there on social media to try to break through the noise. So what I said, cry about it if you want, but weighted balls and heavier than 5 ounce plyos or baseballs are not the problem. My apologies if the data doesn't fit your narrative. And apologies if I'm being a little bit snippy, but again, for someone who's been yelled at online for more than a decade about having kids throw plyos and how injurious and I don't think you could understand the depth of which people have taken shots at me personally and my children and the kids that I have in this academy for training the way that we do. Now, I'm aware we live in a facts don't matter era. I get it. I get it. However, what we finally have is I actually have some ammo, right? I have some ammo that's specific to my athletes, my customers, however you want to frame it, my own children, that we understand the thing. So somebody did say, Jay Benson Wright, man, I'm going to give you your props. This is an excellently insightful question. And he asked it in a way that he wasn't being a dick about it. This is a genuine question. Mass times speed. Slower doesn't mean less force. And he's like, he's 100% right. But this is where, like, science warning, like, be careful. He's right. Slower doesn't mean less force. What it does mean is that at the same pitch speed, the heavier balls load the joints more. Like there's more loading on the joint, but because the arm speed is less, the amount of varus torque that's on the elbow is reduced. Does that make sense? If it's not really connecting, think about it like this. You're going to go in and you're going to do some squats in the gym tonight. And you are going to do them either with like a, I don't know, 50-pound kettlebell or 225, 315 on your back or whatever. That load is going to increase the amount of load on your joints, right? The external load you introduce to the equation in the form of barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, whatever, the load on your joints goes up. But what changes also when you put 225 or 315 or a 50-pound kettlebell in the equation? Your movement speed goes down. Does this make sense? So the reason that the total amount of stress on the joints is not more than you can accommodate, and your spine doesn't like crumble because it's made out of balsa wood, is because the total stress is lower because the movement speed is lower. And again, I don't have a CSCS. I am not a doctor. I am not a biomechanist. So if I have fumbled some of this, then you can just ascribe that to this being something that I have lived on the fly and learned about for 15 years and I didn't go to school for. But the point that I'm making, at least the point that I'm making specific to this kind of question of like, is it safe for kids to throw weighted balls? The thing you have to understand is that you don't throw all the balls at the same speed. You throw the lighter balls faster and the heavier balls slower. And from that, what we understand is that the speed of movement, otherwise known as the velocity of movement or the velocity that you're throwing the ball, is a bigger driver of joint stress than the ball weight. That's it. In the study data that we have, every mile an hour of additional velocity creates an additional 2.4 Newton meters of torque. That's the biggest driver. It's not the ball weight. Because as you add weight and mass, movement speed goes down. The difference between a 4-ounce and a 6-ounce in terms of how fast you can throw those balls dwarfs the distance or the difference in terms of the varus speed of torque at the elbow when you're throwing those balls. Sorry for the science. My apologies. Simplest words I can give you: heavier the ball weight is, less the stress on the joint. That doesn't mean you're not loading the tissue in the joint, though. So what is that? How do you start to kind of conceptualize throwing this way? Well, to me, and the thing I'll be acutely honest about is I don't have any data in this particular small sample. Maybe not a small sample. It's 30 athletes, but it's not 300. It's not 3,000. The data that I don't have is I don't have anything that measures like acute tissue adaptation, meaning did these athletes, if you like DEXA scan them, end up with more muscular tissue in the arm as a result of throwing heavier balls? I don't have that. I don't have that data, and I'm not trying to represent that I do. However, if you understand by looking at the data and that the 6-ounce ball loaded the joints more than a 5-ounce, the 6-ounce ball is heavier, okay? There's more load on the tissue from having that, from moving and throwing that ball. They throw it smaller, so the absolute amount of stress is reduced, but the tissue is doing more work relative to the movement speed that's being produced. And if that's true, then really what we're talking about is like, this is how resistance training works. Like this is literally how resistance training works. I get under a bench, I put 135 on the bar. That's more than I have ever moved. There's load on the tissue. I do that with consistency enough to drive adaptation, and my tissue and my tensile strength goes up. Again, I can't tell you in this study that I have data on tissue adaptation. I'm not saying that. I can't say that these kids' arms got stronger. What I am saying is if you understand the concept of what's kind of being confirmed here, ball weight goes up, load on the tissue goes up, stress at the joint while moving goes down. Because again, movement speed gets slower. That sounds a lot like resistance training. That sounds a lot like the basic mechanism of human performance adaptation. So, and again, I'm not saying that stuff can't go wrong or can't be done in an inappropriate fashion. I'm not saying that stuff can't be done inappropriately or recklessly, right? You can have guys who have bad strength training programs that get hurt. Like that's absolutely a thing. You can have guys who have bad, I don't know, just training programs, period, that get hurt and don't, again, probably screw up that thing about managing fatigue and managing recovery and acute to chronic workload ratio. I'm pretty confident that stuff is just like broadly applicable to performance improvement in general. But what we are starting to demystify is the mechanism by which weighted ball training works. We're increasing the load on the tissue. That's going to drive muscular adaptation and tissue adaptation. And if we do that the right way, again, this is just a thing that I think. It's not a thing that I know. I don't have the data to back it up. But what I think is happening is that the same mechanism by which you get better at push-ups or better at squats or better at anything performance related is the same thing that's happening with weighted balls. There's no magical mystery. It's just adaptation. It's increasing load. It's also, with the lighter balls, you are increasing super maximal movement speed. This is no different than a sprinter getting on the treadmill that's like ripping at like 20 miles an hour, going as fast as they can, and then hopping off before they wreck themselves. Now, with the lighter weight baseballs, what do you have to manage? Well, you have to manage that additional torque. You have to manage that additional workload that's created. Because as ball weight goes down, movement speed goes up, load at the joint goes up. So one big takeaway here is you have to be really smart about how you manage that stress from underload implements. Okay, fine. Been doing that since 2009, my guy. Got a couple reps involved in that regard. I'm not saying I've been doing it since 2009. I came on in like 2014, 2015. So pretty significant, like groundbreaking research that is coming out of old drivelinebaseball.com. Thanks to Kyle Bodie, our R&D team, our sports science team, Dan Comstock, Alex Cochran, my staff, kind of helping to run this thing. Our players and families are participating, and like I don't know, man. Feels pretty good to answer questions like these that have been knocking around on our ecosystem for a long, long time. And certainly some of them where these conversations date back to the old Reinhold study from back in the day. And again, I think this is a new lens with which to understand that study. It wasn't the ball weights that was the issue. It was the onboarding that was the issue. It was the frequency and volume of high intent throwing that was the issue. It's not the ball weights. It's not. I understand we're in a post-factual landscape, but like that's what the science says, what the data says, and if you want to continue to push that narrative in another way, you're just like trying to tell me that the earth is flat. And like sometimes on this stuff, I'd go like, you got to hear both sides, but like you don't have to hear both sides. The earth is not flat. Weighted balls are not the problem. I digress. And other than that, man, the other thing that has occupied me is just, I suppose, being a parent. I thought having older children that this thing would start to get a little bit easier. Fun fact, that was a lie. Perhaps it's just a lie that I told myself, but it's a lie nonetheless. So we had our partnership kind of kick off for our parents, and specifically our parents, with 3A Athletics, and Trav Snyder, and Seth Taylor. And Seth drops this real gem of a quote. And he's talking about the relationship between parents and coaching and players in sport. And he's like, it's like you're on a ship, and the coach is going to be in the ship with the player, right? And you're navigating rough seas. Sometimes you get some smooth sailing, but a lot of this experience, especially in baseballs, man, you are navigating rough seas, and the parent is not in the ship. The parent's in the lighthouse. The lighthouse does not move. The lighthouse just stays there, and it is a North Star for the pilot or the player and the coach to orient towards. And it provides some amount of direction and some amount of safety, but like it stays in the lighthouse and it doesn't go onto the ship. So my kid worked his tail off this off season, and talked about the showcase stuff, and that's all went really great before his season. Everything looked good going into scrimmages. We get into the season, and he hits a grand slam in the first game of the year. And that was pretty cool, man. It felt really, really good for the kid, because you get those type of moments, these breakthrough moments where it's just really evident that performance is not accidental, and it's a result of really like a lot of hard, sustained work over a long period of time. It makes my heart really full when I see my kids have those type of moments. Like my daughter called me today. She's in college, and she's like, Dad, I think I might be smart. Oh, do tell. Please do tell. This child who, since she was like 2 years old, I've just known has the capacity to do darn near anything she sets her mind to. She had a moment in class talking to a peer, talking to in front of a professor, where she was just like, she kind of realized like she knew a little bit more about something that she thought she did, and more than one of her peers, and felt really accomplished in that. And she's been doing great in college. So Danny, grand slam in the first game, man. Like it was a wonderful moment, and I posted it on social, some video that I have from back when he was like 8 or 9, of us being on that exact same field. So we used to run, little league tryouts on this field, and sometimes either before the tryout or after it, he and I would still get a chance to like hit on that field, and we would go out in a left center, and we would use the fence out there as like our external goal. And what we would be working on is trying to hit a ball over that fence. You probably got to go like, I don't know, call it like a 30-degree launch angle, maybe from where we were. I don't know, 25 to 30 might get it done. And I would just be out there, man, just giving him like side softies and just letting him just try to rip it over that fence. And the joy of just like learning a thing. I think when I went back and watched that clip of him trying to hit balls from the outfield over this fence, that he then, as a 17-year-old, hits a ball over the fence in a game, bases full. The one thing that was not lost on me was the amount of joy that those sessions contained for both of us. It's I don't know that I realized what a privilege it was back then. I mean, I think I did. And I did because of my own experiences in the game. I think I did because of how I grew up. So I haven't been obtuse to it. But let's just call it call it 9 years later, first game of his junior year, grand slam. Oh, I on that same field, man. I just again felt very surreal. Um, and I think it was great for the kid to to have that moment. But then you get into the grind of the season, and one of the things that you can kind of find in high school baseball is a lot of variance around just performance. Um, and the dance that we do as hitters is always in consideration of what the pitcher is able to give you. And earlier on in the year, we saw some kids who were like, I don't know, I'd say probably higher sevens to low eights. And then we went through a stretch where probably didn't see a pitch over like 72, 73 for like a week and a half. And had just felt like the kid didn't perform the way that he wanted to in that environment. So we tried to understand it. And what we ended up doing was we went down a Driveline, just him and I, a little bit later at night. So we had the gym to ourselves, and we just hit for like an hour and a half. And by we, I mean he's feeding and I'm hitting. I'm sorry. Oh, let me correct myself. I'm feeding, he's hitting. I'm not hitting. And the first few rounds are literally the way that we tried to understand the problem was he was not he was getting contact way too far out front. So we're kind of past the point where we're maximizing for bat speed, and we're at the point where the swing path starts to get affected because we start to we're in the last kind of final phase of the swing. So we're getting end cap stuff. We're kind of missing the sweet spot, and consequently not getting the ball flight we want. So we go down here, and it's the first probably 4 rounds maybe, are trying to see it so deep that he can hit a ball like oppo foul to the hot dog cart, the imaginary hot dog cart for a right-handed hitter that's like way, 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 way foul deep there, because we're trying to see it that deep. And we're doing that with like 2 offset hack attacks, where one is like significantly offset on the right side, one is significantly offset on the left side. So we're typically working with the one that's offset on the left side, so you can really see it super, super deep. I try to send it just like as deep and as hard and as flat on the opposite side as you can. And sometimes working even like not trying to hit balls fair on the opposite field side. And the reason we did that is because now that his bat speed is up to low to mid sevens, it's hard to adjust to really, really, really slow pitching. And the conversation that we had before we got to the gym was really about 2 things. One is like, let's put the problem that we have into context. And the problem that we have in context is like we're building a Formula One car. Okay, like we're building a race car that's going to work in a very specific environment. Race car's built. We're on the way to the race course where the race car is going to work. And on the way there, we decide to stop at like a monster truck rally. And we put our race car in the monster truck rally, and we're like, this car sucks, right? It's really bad at this task. It's like, yeah, I mean, heard, but part of the issue is that like we're not predicating this on this type of competitive environment. That's not what we're building for. So a good problem to have, all things considered, that you have so much bat speed that you have to deploy, that you have to learn how to see it deeper so you can still apply that bat speed most effectively with flush contact to an incoming pitch. Okay, fine. But the second thing, kind of going into that session was like understanding that the approach was not just like, and this is, my kid's just like, hey man, I just want to hit. heard. I understand that. What I want him to do, and I think the place that we got to was understanding like the component pieces of the problem. If you understand the problem, then I think you can start to like work through some of the solutions that come downstream from having a very clear understanding what the problem is. So instead of kind of like, hey, well, I just want to get some reps, I want to hip, it's like, no, let's work on a discrete task that we've identified as correlated to the problem that we have. And that is one of those things that like, man, I don't know I don't know where my son's going to go in the game. I don't know if he's going to be done with baseball at the end of this year. I don't know if he's going to decide to play college baseball. I don't know if he's going to have an opportunity to go play college baseball. I don't know where it goes after that. But the thing that I am so just like religiously convicted about is that these type of experiences in the game where you're confronted by something, you did not perform the way that you wanted, and then you're able to like not run away from the fear and not run away from the danger to your ego. And you might have those moments. Anybody can have those moments. But instead of like running away from it, you're like, if the house is on fire and I just run away, I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to be looking at dust. If the house is on fire and I go, all right, what do I need to solve this fire? Oh, I need some water. Oh, there's a hydrant right there. I need some hose. Hose is over there. I need to spray that water in the living room where the fire is the genesis of. Okay, cool. I can put that fire out. But it starts with not running away. It starts with like taking a moment to assess and understand the problem that I'm facing. And if that isn't one of the things that we get, not only through sport broadly, but from this thing, from baseball, I don't know what. That's the deliverable that can color all of these kids' lives in a positive fashion so that no matter what level of the game they get to, they still walk away with something of value that allows them to understand themselves, understand their work, understand their personal relationships. It's perspective on life. And it starts with not running away when we get hurt. Our feelings are hurt. I didn't perform the way that I wanted to. That affects my conception of who I am. There's going to be some fear involved. My ego is going to be in retreat. And instead of responding to that stuff emotionally, I engage my rational brain to understand a problem, to assess a problem, and start to break it down. That's not a sport skill. That is a life skill that I think makes our entire society better. And it just so happens that baseball is a conduit for developing that thing. So we should have more kids play baseball. And like there's layers to this, right? I mean, this isn't the first time that we've had a late night trip to Driveline. It probably won't be the last. When he was younger, these conversations probably didn't involve me getting in a session where every 2 or 3 batted balls, I'm going to ask him what his attack angle was and try to correlate that to both plate of contact and also ball flight, right? The way that I coach it with him at 17 is very different the way that I would coach it at 12 or 13. The bones of the system are probably still there. But I thought it was one of those things where, hey man, see it deep is a cue that I could have thrown at him and we could have never driven down here, but I can't show him what it looks like. Hey, see it deep and be flat. These are things that like I am enabled positively as a coach to be able to assess and understand this way and then communicate. So, if you're like, you're one of those dudes who's like going on these tirades, or you listen to these old, big leaguers from the 90s that crap on technology and they just want it to be the way that it was. again, there's a lot of ego involved in that conversation too. But the thing that I will tell you that's the greatest leverage, you're missing opportunities to connect with kids. You're missing opportunities to help them understand themselves. You're missing opportunities to give them a path to understand this is how I perform now, this is how I want to perform, and this is what it's going to take to get there. Because at default, a lot of them are just going to go, I just want to go hit. I just need some reps, dog. I just need some reps. I'm going to go hit. Fine. I hope that works out for you. I really, truly do. But I'm pretty sure that you're going to make faster progress. You're going to move to the next thing. You're going to move the next rung up the tree if you have some focused, concentrated understanding of what the problem is and how you can start to figure out whether the solutions you're deploying are actually solving the problem. Wasn't anything groundbreaking for us when we came out of that. It's like, hey, man, you need to be able to make flush contact with the ball between 0 and 18 inches out front. And you need all of those things. It's not a single shot solution. It's not a thing that's like perfectly solved. We had a great time. We hit for an hour and a half. I think he came out of there feeling a lot better. It hasn't been perfect since then. Amusingly enough, I think in the second game after that session, he had the single best batted ball that he's had of his season, better than the one that he hit for a grand slam. The grand slam, he got under a little bit, and that thing probably went out at like a 35, maybe a 40-degree launch angle. He just moved the bat fast enough in order to get it out. Had a game Monday of this week, left center gap double, ground rule double, missed going over the fence by a foot and a half. Smoked. Best batted ball he's had of the year. Doesn't mean that it's perfect, right? Like the tricky thing about our game is that you can put all this time into a training capacity, and then you can get into a game and you get 3 ABs, and like you're going to see 2 good pitches to swing at, right? Like it's hard specifically for kids to be able to put that stuff into context. But if you start to equip them with this understanding of like, how do I understand the problem? How do I understand the stack ranking of these type of problems? One of the things that we talked about was the initial cue coming out of that session we had at Driveline, see it deep, flat bat path. And again, had some pretty good results from that. But when we talked after the game that we had a couple days ago, felt like he was not as aggressive as he needed to be about some of the other just fastballs. It's like, okay, cool. Maybe we need to continue to go simpler and simpler. Less than 2 strikes, hunt the heater. That's it. If you see a fat breaking pitch, if you see a hanger, attack. But less than 2 strikes, hunt the heater. That's it. We're going to continue to work flat path. We're going to continue to work see it deep. But as a hitter, man, you probably just need to have one cue. Less than 2 strikes, hunt the heater. Done deal. And I'll say this. My son, if he decided to stop playing at the end of this year, he's not going to walk out of this with a lot of plastic trophies and rings. We didn't accumulate a lot of those things. I think what he's starting to understand, and this is the best part about it, I think he's starting to understand that the thing that he has accumulated is perspective. I think the thing he's starting to accumulate is an understanding of process. And someday, either he will decide that he's done with the game, or the game will decide that it's done with him. And that happens for everybody. And I've tried to see that with like both eyes open for a while here. What I couldn't be any more confident of is that this experience has taught him things. It's taught him things about himself. It's taught him things about being on a team. It's taught himself about his own character. And I'm not saying that if you choose that path of accumulating plastic, that you are incapable of coming to some of those same realizations. I'm not trying to paint it with too broad of a brush. But I will say that I think, if anything, the choices that we've made in this experience have put that thing first, and plastic a very, very, very distant second. And I am so excited about what happens when he's done with baseball, because it will happen eventually, how this experience and these tools and this perspective that have been shaped and tested in this game, he gets then to deploy in other aspects of his life. I couldn't be any more excited to see how that works. And to be frank, I think some of what I'm seeing from my daughter, my wife and I, or some of what we see from our daughter, is emblematic of those same lessons. And I got to be honest with you that, like, what do I think that it would be great for my son to play college baseball? Yeah, man. I'm a baseball guy. Of course it'd be cool. But I have to be I have to see this thing more clearly to understand that getting to a destination in terms of sport isn't the objective. This isn't like a zero sum. And it's certainly, I need to be vigilant about making sure that I communicate that it's not zero sum to him, because I think some of these kids take this thing so seriously that it ends up being a little bit zero sum. And that then creates all this pressure that, funny enough, inhibits your ability to perform the way that you want. That's the goofy thing about it. So we try to do the other thing. Let's focus on process. Let's focus on perspective. Apply those lessons within the game for as long as we're going to play it. And then whenever we decide to be done, or the game decides that you're done, you have some endearing value. And it's like, I think sometimes, man, like when you're struggling as a hitter, or maybe pitching isn't going the way you want, it feels like you're just carrying around like a backpack just filled with lead. And that backpack contains all your previous struggles and all your anxieties and all your fears about what this means for who you are and what you can become, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we understand that, like, the path to performance is like, you've got to take that backpack off. Learning that lesson, I think, sets you up as an adult to not have a backpack of lead, but like maybe it's a fanny pack worth of tools. I think my kids are fanny pack kids, if you pick up what I'm putting down. Anyways, we're getting into the very esoteric phase of the podcast, which probably means I need to stop talking. Thank you guys for being here. We're back. We're going to try to get back in a good cadence of things. We got all sorts of fun stuff coming up. We're doing tryouts early for our Washington Academy teams. I'm working on some training concepts to be able to engage with teams that want to run a Driveline style experience that aren't in the Washington area. So if you got like a little inkling that like the idea of a powered by Driveline team is exciting to you, and we're this deep in the podcast for you to listen to this tag, Deven at drivelinebaseball.com with 2 E's, holler at me. I want to do some market research, figure out how we can make something work. Again, Assessments Driveline, it's popping off. We're doing the thing. We're in the spring, getting ready for summer ball. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be crazy. We're going to have fun. Thank you guys for being here. Axpat.com, code DL20, get you 20% off. All the other stuff I said about youth assessments, drivelinebaseball.com/training/youth. Go check that out. That's all I got. My name is Deven. I am, as per usual, down by law, and I will catch you next time. Thanks, bye.